I would like now to invite Nick Holmes to take the floor. Nick is with Island Conservation, and we work very often together, and he will mention some practical examples, some practical tools that we have to respond to this threat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piero, and thank you everybody for coming along. It's a pleasure to see you all here. So, Braulio mentioned earlier about the HE targets and Target 9 specific to invasive alien species, and what I want to talk about today is specific to eradication of invasive species, particularly invasive vertebrates on islands. And there's obviously a key link there, as Braulio pointed out, and the eradication of invasive vertebrates from islands in protected areas can really help contribute towards the protected area values of biodiversity conservation. So myself and several colleagues at Island Conservation, Piero and Shema, and the University of California at Santa Cruz have helped put this together. So what I want to do today is to make the first dichotomy and talk about why we should be making special recognition of islands whenever we're talking about invasive alien species. Talk about what it means to eradicate invasive animals from islands for those that are unfamiliar with those types of practices. Talk about this tool, this technique, in the role of broader island restoration. And then I want to focus in on a few examples of how islands have responded once eradications have taken place. And we'll show a few pretty pictures as well. This is the Desecheo amoeba. Desecheo is a small island that's west of Puerto Rico.
Hello, I'm Ignacio Pereira from Architecture.
So, islands really are a special conservation need, and when you look at the terrestrial surface area of the planet, islands represent less than 5% of that total terrestrial area. Yet we know that approximately 70% of extinctions, recorded extinctions in the last half millennia, and about 40% of today's recognised critically endangered species occur on islands. So when you think about islands, they have a disproportionately higher rate of extinction and endangerment. And you can see that here in the black. And when we look closer at the causes of those of extinction and endangerment, we know that habitat loss is key. But if you make that dichotomy between continents and islands, you can see that invasive alien species have a much higher causal link towards extinction and endangerment. And again, you can see that here in the black. So if we look at this bottom graph, we can see that the impact of invasive species on islands is far greater than on continents. So let's talk about eradications. And what that means, it means the complete removal of a population of invasive animals. And we're primarily talking about mammals: rats, cats, donkeys, goats, cats. These are the types of animals that have been either deliberately or accidentally introduced to many islands across the around the world. And just for example, rats, invasive rats, Rattus norvegicus, Rattus rattus, Rattus exulans, have been estimated to occur on almost 80 or 90% of the world's archipelagos. So it's actually quite rare to get yourself to an island system that is devoid of the invasive rat. And we know when we look globally, there's been more than 1,300 attempts at invasive animal eradications around the globe. We know more than 900 of those have been recorded as successful. Maybe 140 have failed. There's more than 100 that are in progress or being planned, and we know of about 150, mostly for rats, that have been successful but subsequently reinvaded. And these are occurring on more than 840 islands around the world, and we see more than 60 different countries and territories that have participated in these efforts. And we can make these two pictures here. This is, up the top, this is a team on Isla Cabritos in the Dominican Republic. This is the local Dominican Republic NGO, Grupo Jaragua, and team members from Island Conservation. And they're working together to take donkeys and cats off this island. And what this image represents is a highly experienced teams typically work to do this effort. Down below, this is in the Galapagos National Park, where Island Conservation worked with the Galapagos National Park to remove rats from several islands. And this relies pretty heavily on helicopters once you get above a certain island size. And of course, technology such as GIS is absolutely integral. If you think about that earlier goal we stated of reaching every single animal within that invasive population. So how do we know all this? We make great efforts, and we're very lucky because we are a community. All of you in the room, you're a part of that community. We share information, and Island Conservation works with these groups here, the Invasive Species Specialist Group, University of California, Santa Cruz, and 2 groups out in New Zealand, University of Auckland and Landcare Research. And we publish online and make publicly available the database of islands and invasive species eradications. So we try very hard to keep track of every one of these attempts, regardless of the outcome. And we track the location, the methods used, the status, the key contacts, and we try and rank the data quality as well. This is Tambouen Island, and my apologies to anybody from New Caledonia on my pronunciation. Rats were taken off this island, and less than a couple of years later, the IUCN vulnerable fairy tern was recorded breeding on the island. And you can see this is a ground nesting bird, and it would be near on impossible for this animal to persist in the presence of such a voracious predator like the rat. We can track efforts over time. There are more and more efforts. So along the x-axis there, we can see time. These are decades. And the bright green, these are successful eradications. The light green, eradications that are either in progress or being planned. And so we're getting much better at this, and there are more and more efforts, and particularly more and more collaborative efforts across boundaries, across agencies, across organisations. And when we look across the globe, this is actually a snapshot from our online database. So I'd encourage you all to go and visit. It's a lot of fun. And click on each of these and learn a little bit more about such neat conservation actions. You can see they're scattered across the globe. Particular emphasis in New Zealand and Australia, and quite a few up in the Aleutians and in the UK. When we overlay this with the Protected Planet, so the World Database on Protected Areas, when we look at those 670 islands where there's been 900 successful attempts, more than half of those occur on protected areas. And particularly Category 1 and Category 2, wilderness areas and highly protected national parks. And in many cases this is because of, this is in part because in order to have a successful eradication you need successful biosecurity. And biosecurity is typically implemented by some sort of agency in perpetuity. And it's with national parks and protected areas that that partnership and that bond is forged and maintained into the future. So, not surprisingly, we see a very large, more than half of eradications have occurred on protected areas. So, eradications are almost a prerequisite or a baseline conservation activity for that broader umbrella goal of island restoration. And achieving these broader restoration goals often requires a combination of techniques to get there. So for example, in New Zealand, this is Manar Island. And on Manar, back in the early 90s, they took mice off the island, and now they're in the process of bringing that island back to its original state by translocating examples of what used to be there, known from the fossil record, or to replace animals that would serve a specific ecological function. In addition, they're revegetating habitat and removing invasive weeds. And this is a scientific nature reserve, so again, one of the highest ratings for IUCN protected areas. So eradication is a critical first step, or a critical core activity towards achieving these broader restoration goals. Another good example is Kaho'olawe in Hawaii. This is a state nature reserve. And here in Kaho'olawe, there's ongoing habitat restoration. This used to be target practice for the US Navy in all their wisdom. It's since been given back to the native Hawaiians, who have far better wisdom, and they are now moving this towards a cultural and a natural restoration goals. So they're doing a great many activities, including revegetation, and on the cards is proposed eradication of cats and rodents. And Thinking about broader restoration goals, the animal up the top here is the critically endangered Laysan duck. And this duck only occurs in the northwest Hawaiian Islands, on 2 islands, and it was just translocated to a 3rd. All 3 of these islands are less than about yay high. They are low elevation islands. And in the face of sea level rise with projected climate change, this animal is at significant risk of losing all of its habitat. And in the recovery plan for this animal, it's written by USGS, you can see the translocation to high elevation islands is a fundamental activity that needs to occur. And Kaho'olawe is one of those places that it could go, but not until cats and rats are removed. So it's a combination of these restoration activities, of which eradication of invasive species is a core prerequisite, that this type of island restoration activity can almost make an arc with a K, that provides refuge for species at risk from projected climate change. So this is an eradication that's yet to happen. Now I want to show you a few examples of eradications that have happened and some of the outcomes that we're quite proud to see occurring. This is Palmyra Atoll, which occurs in the middle of the Pacific in the Line Islands. This is a national wildlife refuge. It's under the jurisdiction, for better or worse, of the United States. And rodents were removed from Palmyra in 2011. This was a remarkable achievement. And 3 years after the eradication, what we're seeing is a massive increase in seedling recruitment. The photo up the top here, this is Pisonia. Pisonia grandis. Pisonia is a relatively rare tropical tree type. And this photo up the top is just 1 year after. We can look down the bottom, we have locally rare tree species. This is Barringtonia. We saw a massive increase in seedling recruitment. And this is less than a year after rats were removed. And specific to Pisonia, we went back this year, and we can see that those seedlings that sprouted 1 year after the eradication, we're now starting to see the initial stages of succession. And prior to the eradication, there was literally no natural recruitment of this tree. So removing rats were a significant herbivore, seed predator in this environment. We're now starting to see an alteration in ecosystem function, more of a shift towards perhaps what it used to be. We're also seeing some change to problematic species like coconut. And coconut may or may not be native to this atoll, but without a doubt it's problematic. It can grow quick and it can outcompete. And so monitoring these outcomes is going to be really important for management as they try and attain their protected area goals of biodiversity conservation. So kudos to the Nature Conservancy and the US Fish and Wildlife Service for their roles in reaching this outcome. This is San Nicolas Island in the Channel Islands in the USA, and cats were removed in 2010. Now this is a military base. Fantastic opportunities with the military because you have very good biosecurity. This island it belongs to the military. It's not a protected area per se. Perhaps it is just by proxy. But the natural resources on the island are managed jointly with the US Fish and Wildlife Service and the Channel Islands National Park, of which San Nicolas is a larger part of that archipelago. Now, not long after cats were removed, the US Fish and Wildlife Service has proposed the downlisting of the night lizard, which you can see up here in the top right. The night lizard is listed as threatened on the US Endangered Species Act, and because of the removal of cats from San Nic and the removal of goats from San Clemente nearby, these are removal of key threats to this animal, and they see reasons to have this animal downlisted. This is a fantastic outcome that we're all very excited about. This is Howard Island in the Aleutian Islands. This is again under the jurisdiction of the USA. It's a national wildlife refuge, and Norway rats were removed in 2008. It used to be called Rat Island, and probably one of the better outcomes, one that we're really proud of, is it's been returned to its Aleut name, which is Howard, which means those two hills over there. So rats were removed, and almost within the first year of the project, non-target impacts were recorded. We saw non-target mortality of bald eagles and gulls. Some of you might be familiar with that. We returned to the island 5 years later, and what we're seeing these non-target mortalities. They're now rebounding. We're seeing more gulls than there were prior to the eradication. We're seeing an increase in bald eagles. we're starting to see an increase in the small passerines, both in terms of their abundance, the calling rates, and their distribution across the landscape. We're also starting to see seabirds return, and that's what these islands are. These Aleutian Islands are very much like these New Zealand seabird islands. Seabirds are the ecosystem engineers in these environments. I want to play something. I hope we don't all go deaf hearing it. This is a storm petrel. So we use automated acoustic data loggers. It's basically just a microphone connected to a little green box. It records sounds, we pick them up 6 months later, and we count the calls like this. It's a storm petrel. It's about the size of an apple. You can hold it in your hand. It's very dark. And this is courtship activity. So this is probably a male calling to a female in the sky, and this is how he's telling him that he's really sexy and he should come down and they should make an egg together. These birds are nocturnal. They evolved in the absence of rats, and they are sitting on the ground calling to the sky. You couldn't imagine a more vulnerable position in the position of a predator like the Norway rat. It's just too easy. We're starting to hear more and more of this calling activity. And for the first time, we recorded the tufted puffin, which is up here on the top right. So we're quite excited about that. This is Anacapa. We'll take you back to the Channel Islands in California. This is the national park, Channel Islands National Park. Rats were removed in 2001 and 2002. And the marriage here went beyond the National Park Service and the protected area and to oil spill mitigation money. The American trader sank decades ago. They impacted many seabirds, and the owner of the vessel was forced into a bond of seabird farming. They needed to find a project where they could make more seabirds than they had harmed. And that beautiful marriage took shape here on Anacapa. And one of the birds that we're now seeing more and more of is the Scripps' mulet. Again, a very small thing, nests in cliffs, highly vulnerable to rats. And 10 years later, we're now seeing more than 130% increase in nest occupancy. And one of the really unexpected outcomes was, for the very first time, we found the ashy storm petrel. The ashy storm petrel, you can see it being held in a hand here, little tiny fluff ball. And we were not expecting to see this thing, and now it's been recorded breeding there. This is listed as endangered on the ICN red list. So this is a fantastic outcome for this species as well. So just in summary, when we think about islands, islands are a special conservation need, but they are a remarkable island conservation opportunity. You can do things on islands you can't do on the mainland. And eradication of invasive mammals is a really important restoration tool, particularly when it's combined with lots of other conservation tools. And they can be very effective at supporting the protected area values of biodiversity conservation. And I wanted to leave you with some photos of a place that's very close to my heart. This is Macquarie Island, down in the sub-Antarctic. It's under the jurisdiction of Australia. And this is the site of the largest ever mouse, rat and rabbit eradication in the world. And they recently declared that a success. So that's a real credit to the Tasmanian Park Service. So thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. Beautiful pictures that help, of course, in the hard work and days of work. So very nice. Thank you very much, Nick. So I'm very glad that we have some examples of concrete work that we can do to protect our biodiversity, and I really think that there's been so much good work around the world that should be more circulated, more publicized, because we can learn from it and do more.